Alright, hello and welcome to episode 19 of my interruption. Sorry about that, train. Welcome to episode 19 of my Retro City Rampage Clone in Unity tutorial. Today we're going to be doing chunks of the world. So basically we're going to have Retro City Rampage is like an open world game, alright? So we're going to have a city area or something to just roam around and do stuff in. But we're not going to see the majority of the city, are we, at any one time? So we're not going to really need it. And for things like the NPC AI, if we're getting a random point, we don't really want to get like a random point across the map because it's kind of pointless, because he'll just go there and it'll be taking up resources, but won't be able to see him. So basically, we divide the world into chunks, and it will allow us to basically say we'll have 20 NPCs at the most, and they'll be roaming around this one chunk. Maybe you can have more than one chunk loaded and they go between them. But yeah, that gives like the illusion of the city being populated, but it's more efficient because we only have as I said, up to 20 is the limit I've set. So I'll just show you it right now. All right, so just ignore the invalid targets. That's just basically. Before I start, I did make some bug fixes, which I put in a separate part, which I'm not posting to Reddit. So the bug fixes and some advice some guy gave me on Reddit in the last one when I posted it. So yeah, go check that out. It's the last episode. But yeah, so basically, you can see that they're all roaming around and that. So, but if we go south, you can see that it loads in the second chunk that's below us, so you can see, and that now NPCs are spawning in this chunk as well. So you just saw that one there, and they're still spawning here because the chunk is still active. But if we head even further south, that chunk should stop loading in. Yep, you can see it's gone. All the NPCs there are gone, and the NPCs are now just roaming around this chunk. The cars still go around here. I've not added in car spawning yet, so that'll be in the next episode. But yeah, I just wanted to add that. Just wanted to keep it simple for this one ish. I don't know why that didn't have health on it. Oh well. Yeah, and we can go this way, and it'll load up another chunk. I think actually we might see a bug here. Yeah, but it deloads a bit too soon, so I'll have to fix that for next time. But yeah, it's just basically showing you the principle of how it works. So as you can see now, the NPCs are in this chunk. There aren't any loading in the other better areas because we don't need them to. And it still looks like they are. And I've not set cars to spawn properly, so I'll do that next episode. And now to show you how this works, basically. First things first is not something I've written, but comes with the A-Star free version. It is a procedural grid mover. Basically, you set a target. In this case, it's the transform, because we want the grid to follow the transform of the player. And it moves with it. So if the player is 10 units or more away, it will set the center of the graph here to the player's position. So it just basically follows it, and yeah. You have to make sure your A-Star grid is big enough so that any NPCs won't get caught outside it, or if they do, to get it deleted, to delete them so it doesn't produce errors and whatnot. And these aren't like proper errors, it's just me debugging, passing out the log for invalid target to here. So basically, if this happens, if the target's null or invalid, it'll just go and get another target. That's just saying that it happens. It doesn't make that much of a difference, and that's just paths failing because of the A-Star thing, because they're outside of the grid, so they get deleted and whatnot, I think. So yeah, now let's get on to the scripts. So first things first is the chunk. Basically, it has the game object, which it is, so it has a reference to itself, and a boolean to say, is it disabled? I'll just show you what the chunk contains of, is made up of. Basically, if we go to chunk test here, we've got the traffic points, which are the green and red arrows, the interactable objects, which in this case are just the two vending machines for weapons, the patrol points which the players can go to. The road markers? Wait, what? Road markers. Oh yeah, the road markers. Sorry, I forgot what they were for a second. The road markers, which basically set out which basically act as a block between the pavement and roads, and the actual sprites, which are under the world building example, which we used the CM Tools Tile Master thingy to build. We've got basically just 4 of them, so it'd be quick and easy to do. So yeah, that's it. We've got a method to get the get chunk, so it'll return basically this chunk, which is assigned in the start method. And then we've got disable and enable chunk components. So this is a bit like weird looping that I've had to do to disable and enable all the scripts and game objects and whatnot. So I'll just go through this. So basically, it gets each child in the chunk. So we don't want to actually disable the chunk parent with the script on, which would be this object, but we do want to get and disable all these objects and their children. So all the traffic points and whatnot, you don't want them to be displayed or anything. Let's see. So we cycle through all the children in the transform, and then we get all the child objects from the child, so the grandchild, if you will. So I'll just show you that. So the chunk chest is the parent. These 5 are the child objects, and then say something like the traffic point will be a grandchild object, which is the name it takes in the script that I've given it. Yeah, so just so that you know how that works. And then it goes through there, so it checks for behaviors which basically are scripts. So this just basically gets a script and disables them, and then it uses their behavior because I think all of them inherit from it. So like mono behavior inherits from it. So all the scripts basically do too. And this just gets the child from the child, so grandchild. That's it. And then it disables the grandchild object. And then when it's gone through all the grandchild objects, it will disable the child object. And then once it's gone through all the child objects, it will set is chunk disabled to true to show that the chunk is disabled. And I forgot that's what is chunk disabled equals false. Sorry, I forgot to add that, which is already added there. Well, that's why it didn't break, but yeah, it shouldn't have been there, it should have been there. Yeah, basically enable chunk components is the same, but instead of setting them to false, it'd be true. And I think we activate the game object first, then we activate the scripts, whereas in the disable, we deactivate the scripts, then we deactivate the game object. So yeah, that should be simple enough if you can get your head around that. Now we have a chunk manager, which basically decides when chunks should be disabled and enabled. So basically, we have an array of chunks called chunks, the player game object, and the chunk width and chunk height. Now, I'm just having since it's all for this example, all the chunks are literally the same chunk. It doesn't really matter, but you could add, like, say, a variable to chunk for the chunk width for chunk height if you wanted different widths and heights in tiles or units or whatever for them. But for this example, we're using all the same ones, so it can just be here, and that's used later. So these just assign the variables, and alright, now we've got on to should the chunk be enabled. Oh, actually, I should probably do that. Should chunk be loaded first? So, there's a train coming. I can hear it. 1 second. I'll just load up GIMP actually because I need that for a second. Okay. Alright, script. So basically, this basically returns a boolean and is passed in the position of the chunk to check whether it should be loaded or not. So basically, we check if the player's transformed position, the player's x coordinate is more than I think it's the chunk's position x coordinate plus the width of the chunk divided by 2, because we're measuring from the center of the chunk. plus 10 to add a little leeway. Or we have the same for if it's less, so we're checking its chunk position minus instead of plus, and minus 10. And we're doing the same for the Y, so it checks if the player position is the Y coordinate is more than the chunk's Y plus chunk height divided by 2 plus 10. So if any of these conditions are met, it's set to false, so we're not close enough to the chunk to load it in, which will be changed next time because of that bug, but whatever. If we don't meet these conditions, then we are near enough to the chunk to load it in, so we turn true. I'll just give you a little visual demonstration. I can find the box tool. Right, I'll go to small. That's too small. Alright. So that's the chunk, basically. That's the chunk that's loaded in. If we do red for the y-axis, or x-axis, so... Oh shit, I thought it didn't change to red. Why not? Okay. Yep, now we are. So, if we are in these red boxes, which shouldn't work because we need to add this bit as well, but whatever. So if we are in any of these red boxes, then basically we should load this chunk. But if we're outside the red boxes, we shouldn't load it. But as you can see, it comes with the problem of doing this. So we need to add some kind of leeway to the X and Y to make sure it works. So I will work that out for next time. But yeah, that is basically, so loads in the red area, it doesn't load in the white, the outside of it. That's basically it. And then basically should a chunk variable uses this method, so it goes through all of the chunks, and then if it's false, if we shouldn't load a chunk and the chunk is loaded or disabled, if the chunk isn't disabled, sorry, I know it might be, sorry if it's confusing because I keep saying the wrong, like saying the wrong thing for the variable, but it's sort of the same. So if the chunk is loaded and it shouldn't be, it just disables all the components. And if the chunk is disabled and it shouldn't be, it loads them again. So that's basically what that does. And these are both chunks are on the chunk parent, while the chunk manager is on the game object, the game controller. And as you can see, when I press play, it finds all the chunks and deloads them because we're not close enough to it. Now, one more thing I have changed is the NPC controller to basically make sure we load and they spawn and despawn NPCs. So we've got 2 ints, so this is the current number of NPCs, the maximum number of NPCs, and a prefab for the NPC, which is just assigned to from the controller. It's not very good at the moment. I'll have to rewrite it. Might do it, change it so we can have different like NPC sprites, but for now we're just going to use the same one. So basically what it does is it has so we go through all of the NPCs and NPCs, so in the array of NPCs, and since we're only having like a maximum of 20, this can probably stay for a while because it won't be too inefficient. Yeah, and so basically what we do is we check if the NPC is more than 25 units away from the player, it basically just destroys it. Because we're going to assume that it's too far away, so we won't really need to see it again, so we'll just destroy it to spawn one closer to the player. And likewise, we have a method called spawn NPCs, which basically sets number of NPCs to NPCs.length, and if we have less NPCs than the max NPCs, it will create a point at one of the random points, the position, create an NPC. It'll instantiate an NPC at the random point to move to, which uses the same method. So basically, it'll get a patrol point from any random one that's currently loaded in by the chunk manager. So it'll basically scan here for patrol points, see if there are any loaded, and it will then return a random one that's loaded. And like from the error fixing episode that was uploaded earlier today or yesterday, depending on when I do this, it'll like basically just, this is just a check to make sure that there are actually points, and if it doesn't, it returns null. So it knows, all right, we've not found one, we should try again, because maybe this time it'll have an array of points. But yeah, and I think that's it. Yeah, I don't think we added anything else into this part. No. We just added this condition to the last episode for bug fixing and whatnot. So yeah, that's just active in hierarchy. That just checks if the pathfind. So like on the like in the odd case where if a chunk was deloaded and an NPC was going to a point in it, it would just find another point that was actually active, just so it didn't like roam off into the distance, or just in case it wouldn't get destroyed immediately, or but just to cover all the bases, you know. What else? Civilian traffic AI. We added in the rescan timer, which basically allows, basically sets a minimum of, like basically it can only scan the grid once every 5 seconds just to stop it slogging and going really slow when cars would be interrupted by NPCs and whatnot. And yeah, I think that's it. So cheers for watching. Sorry it's a bit convoluted. Yeah, still getting the hang of this. A couple months in, but whatever. Yeah, you got any questions, comments, advice? Leave it on Reddit, YouTube, whatever. I will read it and address it. Go by the Hotline Miami assets and whatnot, and play loud or quiet and stuff, and I will just show you it again one more time. So we've got chunks here, loads in NPCs here. You can see they're all loaded in. But if we go south, just push through this crowd, it will load in the thing and start spawning NPCs in this chunk. And if we go even further south, stop there, cross in here, it will stop the loading of the chunk and no more NPCs. Isn't that good? Alright, cheers for watching, bye.